So in this video, we're going to go through and set up the Android SDK for a Windows computer. If you're running a Mac computer, again, refer to the Mac section. I've got a whole series of videos there showing you step by step how to configure all of this on a Mac. So assuming you're running a Windows computer, we're going to go through and install the Android SDK. And we're going to discuss also the fact that there's two versions of the Android SDK, but I'll show you that in the video anyway. So let's get stuck into that right now. Okay, I'm at the top level folder of the folder that I've chosen to both put my workspace for my project files and also my Android developer tools. So I'm going to go into my Android developer tools bundles folder, double click into that. Now this time I'm going to run the SDK manager. Now there's two ways of doing that. One way is just to go into Eclipse, start Eclipse, the Eclipse subfolder, then double click Eclipse, run it. I'm not sure why that's saying new folder, but we'll change that back to workspace. Click OK. I just want to show you the two methods of getting into this. So the first way was just clicking on Window once you're in Eclipse and then clicking on the Android SDK Manager. The other way is just click on, I'll exit out of that. The other way is just to go back up a level, and you'll see that there's an executable file here called SDK Manager that's in the ADT bundle folder. I'm going to click on that and run it. I'm going to maximize this window. Now what's happening now is this tool is downloading the latest version, or really the sort of the descriptions for the latest version of the Android tools. And once we select what we want, it will then download those selections onto this computer. So this Android SDK Manager handles new versions of the tools that come out, and we can literally download any version of the Android SDKs that we need. Now by default, if we look at Android 5, now Android 5, which is API 21, and that of course is Android Lollipop, has not been installed. So you can see the Android Developer Tools by default does not install it. In actual fact, confusingly, what the Android Developer Tools install is the Android 4.4W. Now that's the wearable edition of Android, which is made for wearable devices such as watches and so forth. So it's installed that by default, which isn't particularly helpful. And it really means that we're not going to be able to, at this stage, without doing something else, be able to actually create a mobile app. And just to show that, if we just go back to our folder, we'll just load Eclipse again. And if we just go and have a look and see what, I'll click on, go into Windows and then Preferences. If we go into Android, now you can see as far as Eclipse is concerned, it's only got access to Android 4.4, which firstly isn't the version we need, but it's also that wearable edition. So we want to get rid of that. Then we want to also make sure that we load a version 5, because that's the one we want to work with. I'm going to close it down. Okay, go back to the Android SDK Manager. First things first, I'm going to uninstall the Google API 20, the version that we don't need. So I'm going to just basically deselect everything there, deselect everything there. I'm going to go over to here, which under Android 4.4W API 20, I'm going to click on SDK Platform. Now notice over here, I went to delete it, it's saying delete 2 packages. So what that means is I've got something else ticked. You have to be very careful when you're installing or deleting anything in this screen that you've actually selected only the things you want to select. So you can see here there's another thing there that was going to be, well, it was going to be deleted, but of course it wasn't installed, so it wasn't going to really cause any damage. But I'll go through and have a look now. There should only be the one tick under that. Oops, there is another thing, Android Support Library. That was the one that was going to be deleted. So you can see now that's updated, delete 1 package. So I'm going to delete that. That should only take a second, obviously. In actual fact, I think that's finished. We'll just have a bit of a look here. And you can see it's not installed, so that's good. Okay, step number 2, we want to now go through and install the new SDK version. Now, this is going to be this section in here. So by default, you can click on everything. You could certainly do that and download it that way. It is a fairly large download, so if you've got a restriction on the number of gigabytes you can download per month, or your internet access is slow, or both, I suggest you maybe just go through and trim some of these things. What I'll do now is go through some of the options so you know what's what. Firstly, I do recommend you install the documentation. You'll need that in future videos. We'll talk about that. And the first thing here, the SDK platform, you'll need that. Now that's the standard Android software development kit for Lollipop, which is version 5. But down here, there's also a Google API. Now that you can see there on the screen, it says Google APIs, which is Android API 21 revision 1. So that's really the Android platform plus the additional Google things. Now Google bundle things like Google Maps, for example. So what I normally recommend you do is install both of those. So we want to leave the tick next to SDK platform and Google APIs. Next on the list, Android TV. We aren't going to be doing that at all in this course, so I recommend we just take both of those off. Now these system images. Firstly, the ARM EABI is, for want of a better term, the slow way to run an Android virtual device. And we're going to talk more in a future video on what an Android virtual device is. But for now, I suggest you disable the ARM version on both. And that leaves us now just with a few images here. We've got the 64-bit edition of Android, and we've also got the 32-bit. So by default, I'm going to remove the 64-bit because you don't really need that. That's a new thing with Android 5. And I'm just going to leave just the two images, the x86 images. So the Intel x86 Atom image, and then also the Google APIs. And lastly, down here, I'm going to deselect sources for Android SDK because that's actually the source code itself, and we don't need to be editing the source code or changing the source code for the software development kit itself, because what we're doing is using the software development kit to make apps. Okay, so that's probably the minimum that I suggest you download. So at this point, we're ready to go. I'm going to click on Install 5 packages. Now what we'll need to do is click on anything that's got a cross in it. You'll need to select it and then click on Accept License. And you can see in some cases it will actually then, because you've done it once, accept it for everything. So basically what we're doing is we're accepting the license. You know, like most software these days, it won't download until we've done that. Click on Install. And what's happening now is it's going to go ahead and download those files straight off the Google servers, and also it'll go through and install it into the relevant folders, such that Eclipse will then be able to see that the relevant versions have been installed, and you will be able to use those when creating our mobile apps. And just a few things while we're waiting. We'll scroll down to the bottom. In a later video, we're going to be talking about the Google USB driver, and we're also going to be talking about the Intel x86 emulator accelerator. Now the USB driver, just to give you a bit of advance notice, if you're running a Google device, like for example a Google Nexus tablet, and you want to run that or use that Android device to for testing apps and so on and so forth, just for development in general, you'll need to use this driver here. If you're not running a Google device, in other words, you're running some other brand, Samsung or some other brand of device, you'll need to find the USB driver for your particular device and install that. But we'll talk more about that in the separate USB driver video anyway. And down here under the Intel x86 emulator accelerator, in a future video when we're setting up Android virtual devices, which is a way to sort of emulate Android running on Windows, we'll install that as well. And that's really a way to find a quick way to get your computer to work a lot faster with an emulator. Because generally speaking, when something's emulated, it runs a lot slower than the original. And without this Intel x86 emulator, you'll find it's just dreadfully slow to try and get Android working on your computer. So you'll definitely want to do that, but don't worry, we'll talk about that in a future video. The other thing here I want to talk about is the Android support library. Now you might be wondering what that is, and we're actually going to update that. I should have clicked that. So we will actually, once this is finished, update that. Now that enables you to target different versions of the Android operating system. You can sort of say, I'm building an Android version for the latest, or the latest version, which of course is the Lollipop, the version 5, but you might still want older versions of the Android operating system to work. So if you do target an older version, this support library will come in automatically, be added to your Eclipse project, and will enable that the older computers older devices to run your software, even though they may not be upgraded to the latest version of Android. But we'll talk more on that once we get to creating some mobile apps anyway. Alright, and the other thing was here, these updates, I'm going to go ahead and select those once we've finished here with this upload, with this downloading and installing of what we selected. I'm going to choose those as well. In general, whenever you see an update on something, go ahead and accept the update, because things are being updated and improved upon with Android all the time. The only thing you don't want to do here is select obsolete or incorrect versions. Like, for example, we talked about how Android 4.4W was the wrong version because it was for wearable devices like watches, but there's also a lot of other versions. You can see literally it's every single version of Android that was released, going right back to 1.5 that came out years ago. If you wanted to, you could download all of these and be creating software that works for those environments. Now, I don't suggest you do that. What I suggest you do is really just keep to the latest version. This course, we're really only going to be dealing with API 21, which is version 5 of the Android SDK, which of course is Android Lollipop. Alright, so I might pause this video for a while now and wait till this is just about finished, and then we can continue on with checking the updates and making sure everything's working. You can see we're gradually getting there now. We're getting to the last bits of the installation. I think after this one, there will be one more file that we need to download and install, and we'll be done. So hopefully that'll be pretty quick. Okay, that's done. You notice now to the right hand side, the status has changed to installed for all the things we selected. So I'm going to go ahead now and just, as I mentioned, just the things that had an update available. I'm going to click on those. I think there was 3 from memory. There's one more here, which is the Android support library. So I'm just going to install those 3 packages. Same deal there, click on the item, click on accept license, click on install. Okay, I might just pause the video briefly to let this thing finish. Okay, it's chugging away. Hopefully these last few things will be much quicker and we'll be done. Okay, we're actually done. So we've just got a message on the screen now just to say that essentially it's been updated, and if you want to see the changes, you need to close down the apps and start them again. So we're going to do that shortly anyway. We're done. We can close this now. We're finished with Android SDK Manager. What we'll do is we'll go back to Eclipse though, just to verify that it can now find the updated versions of the Android SDK. So run Eclipse. And we're just going to go into the file, into the window. I'm saying file because on the Mac you go to File Preferences, but of course on a Windows machine it's Window Preferences. Go into Android, and you can see now this is updated. So we can see target name is now Android 5.0, API level 21, and we can see there's 2 versions there. As I mentioned, the generic sort of standard Android version and the Google one that has also got the Google specific things like Google Maps, etc. So at this point, we're done configuring or downloading and configuring the Android SDK. Let's move on to the next video.